Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Casey James Combden, who spent years at the top of the network marketing business. You don't get that level of success unless you understand human behavior and what people want. Today, he helps people achieve the transformation they desire. Let's learn from his experiences. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. I have noticed successful people have certain habits in common. Today, we're going to explore some of those. At the core is getting help, understanding yourself, getting feedback, and taking action. Listen in for the habits and also how Casey is changing the lens he views the world through. Before we get to Casey, I want to talk about how profit comes first in business and personal life. If you're not taking your portion before everyone else gets theirs, more often in life, there's nothing left. And then many people go in debt to cover that shortfall. And doing that is essentially giving up your future. It doesn't have to be this way. When profit comes first in business, business owners take the profit out immediately when the customer pays for the service or product. This ensures that you are profitable and the profit doesn't get spent. We're going to focus on this topic more so going forward because having the fuel to do everything you want is a key component to your success. Today's quote is from our guest. There is no force more powerful in your universe than the need to remain consistent with your expectations of self. This really becomes evident as we talk about balance and harmony today. Casey James Combden was very successful in the network marketing business with Amway. He earned over $30 million. He has owned and consulted to 25 plus businesses over the past 10 years, spanning the financial services, wealth management, and corporate structuring, internet, health and wellness, publishing, wholesale, real estate, venture capital, and the automotive and trucking industries, just to name a few. He's the author of 5 books, and he appeared in the movie Pass It On, and has spoken in front of millions of people in conventions around the world. Today, he's here with us to share his journey and provide guidance for ours. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Casey. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks, Rocky. Great to be here.
And I'm excited for this conversation. So we always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I grew up here in Toronto, Canada, and my mother was an immigrant from England, and she came here when she was around 13, and of course grew up here. She met my father, who was from Newfoundland, the eastern part of Canada. They met very, very young. She was actually had me when she was 16. So she came through a very difficult time. Money was a huge challenge. You can only imagine being 16 years of age. And my father worked as a garage mechanic. My mom worked in a department store, and they just really worked hard to make ends meet. For me, money was, I don't know why, but I was born with the mindset that I was always going to be wealthy. I was like, I was definitely going to have wealth. I was going to be successful. And because the term millionaire was thrown around a lot, I just always said, well, I'll be one of those. I didn't have the specificity of saying, oh, it was a certain amount. I just like saw tiers of success. So money for me came that it was kind of like difficult until it wasn't. I always saw that money was something to kind of be conquered.
Where did that goal come of to become a millionaire? Because I know when I was a kid, I had the same goal.
It's a great question. I don't think that I had it as a goal. I think it's something that gets thrown around. I have 6 kids now, Rocky, and it's funny. I have my 5th child. Her name is Kaylin. She just walked up to me one day. She says, I've decided I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm like, oh, well, good for you, sweetheart. It was just kind of like off the cuff. But if you go to my 4th daughter, which is Carly, she talks about money and likes the nice things and that, but she never talks about the creation of it. And so I think sometimes it's systemic in some children, and in other children, it's kind of a little bit more elusive. I have a 23-year-old daughter who's got 2 grandkids, so I'm a grandfather. So she's my first daughter, and she grew up with just insane wealth around her. I was making $500,000 a month, and our businesses were exploding all over the place. And so she doesn't wake up saying, oh, I'm going to be a millionaire. She just assumes money just flows because that's what her experience was. So I think I'm in the same boat. I watched my parents struggle. My parents said, work hard and then you'll get wealthy or get successful. And I heard the terms around me, 6-figure income or millionaire or all these other kind of terms. And I think that's just where I think each child kind of finds their way. And I don't know about you, but that's really my first recollections of it.
And I had something similar. Even though we were immigrants and my parents were starting over with very little, they were surrounded by people who had wealth. And
right.
So you kind of are in that, for lack of a better word, bubble. And so those are the words and the concepts that are being exposed to you as well. You mentioned something. So you said your daughter just expects money to flow.
Yeah, I think that she witnessed the abundance around her. I have a very interesting story. I know we're going to jump into the family story here shortly, but my very first house purchase was 12,600 square feet. I rented up to that point because my mentor kept saying, this is not the time to own, this is the time to work. And went from 0 to 500,000 a month in 6 years. I was making 100,000 a month at 29, 200,000 a month at 30. And by 31, I was making 500,000 a month. So he's like, we don't have time to slow down for you to buy a house. Keep renting for $1,000 a month. So I have a kind of very bent and weird experience with money. So when we actually decided to have our first child, I had 4 people that worked in the house. We had a nanny, a groundskeeper, 2 personal assistants, a maid. I mean, it was a big adventure. So my daughter, who was obviously my oldest child, she just grew up seeing money flowing everywhere. So it was a just very different lifestyle for her.
Does she still see money flowing everywhere?
Yeah, it was interesting. She was one of the children that you have each vision for your child. Each one of them is all special and different. And I saw her as being kind of creative, and what she was going to do, she's going to start her own company or different things. And one of the things that's really interesting, she jumped straight into sales. She went to a mall one day. She saw somebody selling a cell phone, and she was going to buy a cell phone. And she says, you know what? I like to sell cell phones. And she literally got a job on the spot. And within like 3 weeks, she was the number 1 salesperson on the floor in the mall. They were astounded. And they were like, what is this? She said, Dad, honestly, I go in and I get people real fast. And so I can figure it out. They moved her out of the mall actually to the number 1 store in the center of Toronto and put her in the highest level of competition. She was there. It took her 4 months, but she moved to the number 2 spot. The number 1 guy had been there for literally 20 years. He just has a client base is so massive, but she got to number 2 and she got pregnant. so she no longer works there. But money's always flown around her because I think that she's had an expectation around what I teach, which is unique ability. I've always told my kids, don't get into anything unless the way you do it is effortless for you. As soon as she saw sales and she watched this girl selling a cell phone, she said, Dad, I can do it with my eyes closed. And she said, well, okay, go ahead. She said, I already got the job. I'm just doing it for fun. And that's when I realized, like, yep, if people find their unique ability, Rocky, I believe that most people, their money is attached to their God-given talent, which has to be expanded into an ability with time.
And that's very true. And we're going to touch on that in a little bit, because I think finding your unique ability is difficult sometimes because we can't see it, because it seems so easy and natural. Like she said, I can do this with my eyes closed. It must be no big deal. Everyone must be able to do with that.
To do it. Exactly.
But we'll get to that. How do you go to making that kind of money at such a young age?
Well, let's start with the first part of it is I learned from my parents. My parents, although not immigrants, my mom, although an immigrant from England, she came here and they taught work ethic like I've never seen. Even to this day, the work ethic that they demonstrated, I mean, I'm talking 18-hour days. They were beyond committed to being successful. And they're like, everything is about making sure that you're giving 100%. So I showed up, and the very first job I ever had was a disc jockey. I was a DJ, and I started when I was 13, 14 and started working at a church, would you believe, putting on church dances for the kids. And that moved to at 16, I actually was able to start doing high schools. And then I actually at 16, and of course, this is 30 years ago, Ruggie, but I looked a little bit older than I was at 16. I had facial hair and those kind of things. And one night, the company I was working with, they actually had a DJ get in an accident and physically could not get to the nightclub. And they're like, you're the only person we got. And at 16 years old and 3 weeks, it was October of, goodness gracious, I want to say 1983. I actually got my dad to get me in the car. He got me there like a half hour late to the club. I walked in with my records, played that night at 16 years of age. And the owner came up and he says, you're better than the regular DJ. We'll take you all the time. And he kept looking at me. He says, no, you're good, right? Like you're 18, right? I'm like, yep, I'm 18. And by the time I was 20, I put myself into university and through school, but I was would consider one of the top DJs in Toronto. And by the time I was 25, I was running the largest nightclub in Canada, and I was right at the top of my game. Take that work ethic, take the commitment to personal excellence, and then push that into the network marketing space. And from 25 to 29, I went from zero to hero, just focusing on my unique ability. There's some things that I believe I think every single person has that is really, really blessed. And if they will spend the majority of their time working that blessed part of their personality, that's where their money is. I think the money is hidden in your unique ability and talent if you're willing to work it. And so that's kind of the formula I use for my entire business model with Human Potential International. I'm like, listen, everybody's got something special. We just got to find it out and then put it out in front of you so that you do it. It's effortless and people want to be a part of it and they want to pay you for it.
So let's just touch base on that, just because I want to highlight your success. You were with Amway.
Mm-hmm.
What was your unique ability and how did you hone it to get to the top of the game?
Well, there's two things. I'm an auditory learner, so I want to begin with my learning style. I'm not a visual learner, and I'm not just a little bit of a kinesthetic learner, but I'm an auditory learner, which means that I can listen to something, and as it's being spoken to me, it goes internally inside of me. So when I listen to something, it's like I know. So great news was that the entire Amway business at that time, 1989, 90, when I signed up, everything was on audio cassettes. So they're like, okay, well, just listen to these cassettes and you'll figure it out. Because they didn't have live training and Zooms and Skypes, and they didn't have any of these technologies. And so I would just put the cassettes into my car, and I would drive to work. And at work, I was doing, in the daytime, I worked in sound and lighting equipment. And at nighttime, I was a DJ in the nightclubs of the sound and lighting equipment that we sold. It was kind of like a 24/7 lifestyle. And all I did was just listen. The second thing I have is unique ability. Learning by listening is my style, but my unique ability is my ability to simplify the complex into very clear and succinct language that people go, oh, I get it. And what that does for me is it gives me ability to take a difficult sale, such as the sale of the Amway opportunity. As you can imagine, selling an Amway in the late 80s going into the 90s was not the easiest thing to do with all the jokes and the people and all the things going on. I didn't know any different. I got in and I sold on its value and only spoke to the value of Amway. And I left Amway kind of as the outside and sold the opportunity of what they would get for being a part of something like this. And that was the huge shift for me. I took all the things that were negative about Amway and I took all the things that were positive about it. And I would be transparent with people. And I said, listen, I get it as negative and I get that it's positive. But here's the benefit if you stay focused on the things that can happen for you. So we sold the dream through simplicity. And that's 20 years later, I've been the top network marketer in both Amway and in Canada for most of my life, from pretty much the mid late 20s, 27, 28, all the way through till 2005, 6, 7, 8, 10. 2010 is when I left the industry and left Amway. But I always tell a quick story about my growth. I said, I put 25,000 people into my downline in Amway from 1990 to 1994, and the internet started. So when people talk about old school, I'm like, well, I'm pre-old school. Then people today are building huge networks with network marketing online. I'm actually relationship to relationship teaching those systems. Of course, now that I'm kind of an expert on human potential, I've gone in and quantified almost a grading scale of geniuses. As you may or may not know, there are 11 forms of genius in human behavior right now. And what I'm doing is bringing into awareness for people the fact that if they can focus in on their one particular genius and then learn how to make that available as a sellable or a serviceable skill, then people will pay a premium for it because they know that they're going to get the best of the optimum of a person. Most people accept a job, career, profession based on usually some portion of their unique ability, but they never optimize that ability to the point that it's exceptional, which is the opportunity.
It is. And I think one of the things that you mentioned was that you had a mentor that helped you.
Absolutely. In fact, people ask me, say, okay, and I know we're going to talk about transformation a little bit later, but in order for transformation to take place, in my personal opinion, transformation does not take place in a vacuum. I believe in the law of duality, in the sense that, the law of duality is there can't have a left without a right and up without a down. But the law of co-creation, which is the creation, you can't have anything created in a vacuum. So nature abhors a vacuum, which means that we live in a co-creative universe. So as great as my unique ability was, as great as maybe my work ethic was, my unique ability in a vacuum or without the right mentorship, direction, or leadership was just just an excited kid, playing music on the weekends. I mean, that's as great as I could get it. Mentorship changed everything. When I found the mentor, and his name was Dr. George Berniowski. Dr. George was a doctor of 5 degrees. He didn't have my work ethic. What he had was he had leadership talent to guide a very difficult personality like mine. So, and I need to go back to my childhood. So by the time I grew up in a very, very rough neighborhood, and not kind of Detroit ghetto, but like more lower class, kind of working class in Toronto. And by 7, I was in a gang. And 8, I was breaking and entering. I set a house on fire. I mean, I was a handful. And the police came to the house, and I was upstairs in my bedroom. Police downstairs basically said to my parents, if you don't take him out of this neighborhood, he'll be in jail or dead by 16. He's just too powerful. And I remember when my parents, they literally made the decision that summer to move, and they moved me out of that neighborhood, and they put me into a neighborhood that was a middle upper class neighborhood, that they stretched everything they had to put me there, but they knew that when they got me there that I would flourish. And what was interesting was I took all of that aggression and that power, and I turned it. Like if it was guided, I could be turned into something. And that's actually what I believe mentorship is. I think mentorship is 2 things. Number 1, I think it's wisdom. And number 2 is I think it's time acceleration. So the first part of wisdom is you don't need to, someone says experience is the best teacher. I'm like, nope, that is not the right answer. Experience is not the best teacher. The other people's experience is the best teacher. And that's why I said that mentorship provides time acceleration. My mentor was 45. I was 25. He says, I can save you 20 years. He says, you can be an idiot and keep doing it wrong. And he says, we can have this conversation in 20 years. He says, or I can save you 20 years and you can get this thing over with. And, he needed to lead me in such a way with a strong enough hand to guide me and maintain my confidence without breaking my spirit. So he broke my will, which is my bad habits and my self-deprivating, kind of habits, so to speak. But he didn't break my spirit. He said, like, Casey, you're a good kid that's really stupid. And I'm like, He says, you don't even know how stupid you are. He says, but I like you. And he says, I think you're a good person. You just do dumb stuff with all this power. And he guided me. And with that guidance, he said, you can do it this way. And he said, why don't you put all your ideas through my filter? And he says, and then you can make the decision to do it whichever way you want to. And so for the first time in my life, I had true advisory mentorship, because I think that there's training, coaching, mentoring, and advising. Training is skills transfer. Coaching is action, feedback, correction, action. Mentoring is philosophy, broadcasting. But advising is holding a space between both coaching and mentoring. That's a kind of an all-encompassing experience. So today I advise people about how to put themselves through my filter and say, listen, I'll save you 20 years. Like, you can do it your way. And at the end, if I tell you how I do it and then you go do it your own way, I'll still be standing here, wishing you the best and supporting you, because I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just telling you how to cut 20 years off of this stride. So coaching, mentoring, or in this case, my mentor who eventually became my life advisor, he's the reason I became financially free, successful at every level. I have to give really from 0 to 35, I would say the first 10 years, it was everything. Dr. George was the cornerstone of the creation of this young man called Casey James Combden.
And that was awesome that you ran across that person and he was willing to do that for you.
Oh, yeah.
Created great success. Life is sometimes full of opportunities and they knock all the time. We have to be there to listen. Not everyone will do that.
That's true. He transformed me. Everyone else changed me. They give me a tip or a trick, or they offered me some direction, or, hey, try this, try that. That's what my boss at work did. He said, hey, Case, I noticed you doing this. Why don't you do that? He was a good coach, but he was not a mentor or an advisor. Like, I didn't look at his life or his life choices or his wife and kids and say, gosh, I sure hope my life turns out like my boss. When I met my mentor, my life advisor, like I did with Dr. George, I knew immediately I not only wanted to be like him, but I wanted my life to turn out like his. He had great kids. He had kids actually just a few years younger than me. And he had a beautiful wife that he loved and adored after 30 years. I mean, it was just, there were things about who he was being, not just what he was doing. Most people look to the human doing and say, I want that. My greatest advice to people is look to the human being and say, I want to be that. And the doing follows.
It's funny how a slight twist in perspective changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
That is very true. I think that's a quote I read last night.
Oh, beautiful.
I was in the midst of sending out my email. That was a quote that I had listed on one of the things. I was like, maybe I should use this one.
Yeah.
Here you are at the top of your game, tremendous success, lots of money, but you left. What happened?
Well, yeah. So we'll put it in context. So the majority of my wealth was created in the first 10 years. So from the age of 25 to 35, I was the biggest, the baddest, the strongest, all those different acronyms. But in fairness, I mean, I look back and like to this day, there's no one who's really ever done what I did. And more importantly, was able to assemble what I did. Even some of the top leaders in the world are like, they look back reminiscing going like, Case, you remember when, like, just give you some statistics, Rocky, every Tuesday night at 8:00, I had somewhere between most nights, 5,000 people every Tuesday night at meetings in the local Toronto area at hotels. Every 4 weeks, every first of the month, I had 10,000, 11,000 people in, hockey coliseums. I mean, hockey arenas where we would just put people in events. And, every quarter we would be participating in 30, 40, 50,000 people gathering through the different lines of sponsorship and mentorship all the way up to my mentor. So when I was achieving the success I was achieving, and I mentioned that, I peaked at 560,000 a month, which even in today's standards is like 0.00001 percentile of success achievers in the networking space. I achieved that because all of the elements were in the perfect time. Amway itself was at the peak of its brand. My mentor was at the peak of his game. My mentors were all in alignment. There was a deep bonding and philosophical belief. We believed that we were changing the world for the best. We were free enterprisers teaching about God, family, country. There was ethical behavior that drove all of the values and the work ethics. And there was just so many things right. And in 1999, 2000, 10 years after I started, Amway Corporation made a very hard left turn, and they went from being a reputable long-term heritage brand of home-based business to becoming an online business called Quickstar. And I remember my mentor saying to me, he says, this could be the best or the worst decision historically. They'll look back. And it's just like, I don't remember when Coke changed from Coke Original to Coke Max. And they said, to this day, there's no faux pas worse than what Coke did. I mean, we're talking billions and billions and billions. Well, in the Amway world, the switch from Amway to Quickstar cost them billions of dollars, millions and hundreds of thousands, millions of lives around the world. And literally, I spent 10 more years just trying to hang on to a legacy that I believed in, the dreams I believed in. And by 2010, 10 years later, I realized that the Amway company itself, one of the owners had passed away, and it was being taken over by lawyers. And the company itself is not a bad company. They just evolved, changed, and moved on. And many of us who had been kind of endeared to their values and to the original owners, the values shifted, and the people were just money for them. And we didn't build Amway for that reason. We built the Amway business because we believed in people. We didn't care about the company. And the company made it very clear that if we didn't care about the company, they didn't care about us. And they came to me and said, listen, I was training other companies, and they said, we really don't want you to do that anymore. You need to be exclusive to us. And I'm like, well, I can't do that. And so that's, we parted ways and ended up in a lawsuit. But it was there was no winners or losers. We just, in the end, said, we're at the end of this road. So, and it died. So it caused me to go into a bunch of years of reflection, and I was able to reflect back on, so what did cause the success we had, and the type of wealth. I made 30 million net income. For Amway, I did over $500 million. I don't remember all the numbers specifically on my gross incomes, but I know I netted about 30 million being an Amway distributor from 1999 to 2010 total. So I've achieved great wealth. But again, like I said, when I left the industry, I didn't leave the industry at the top of the game. I kind of left it on the long, slow slide down the ramp to exit.
And I think that happens a lot. We are so used to X, and yet the world around us changes.
Yes.
It's hard to walk away, especially when you're making that kind of money. It's hard to make those changes. And sometimes we don't always see the small changes that are going on around us until one day we wake up and go, how did I get here? This is not what I expected.
Yeah. I knew in 2005, Amway capture took them 7 years for them to figure out that they had made one of the biggest branding faux pas in the history of a generational company. I mean, they are the founders of the $180 billion worldwide 100 million people industry called direct sales. They are the grandfather and the starting point, the genesis of it. And they made a turn, which in 1999 .com, all this kind of stuff going on, they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know which direction, and they made the turn and they lost. By 2007, they went back. They got rid of Quickstar, got their name back, and went into the Amway business. And by that point, I knew I should have left, but I didn't have. So something very important, Rocky, happened to me in 2005, and that was I lost my mentor. And mentorship is, a mentor, advisor, life coach. I mean, you can call them whatever. That person you go to make sure that you're seeing life through the right lens. I lost him in 2005, and he kept saying, Case, I'm not telling you you're bad, you're just going in the wrong direction. You need to look at things differently. And I didn't hear him. And he's like, I got to move on, Case. And he just moved on, and I moved on. It was nothing. It wasn't negative. And I tried to find replacements, like people that I could reach out to that I respected. I had another friend that was a psychiatrist. I was working with him, and he was a part of my business team. And I'm like, well, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? I went to some spiritual, pastors of churches. I went to people that were very, very financially successful. $100, $200 million net worth. And they were like, yeah, Case, it looks good, but it's just not my expertise, So I lost I lost perspective because a mentor sees your enemies before you do. And a mentor or an advisor that's been with you more than 5 years is, and I say this respectfully, but and it's not maybe true for everybody, but for me, they were worth their weight in gold. When he said, "Hey, Case, God bless you. Go your path. You're a great man." Well, I wasn't a young man at that point, but he's like, "Case, you've done great things with your life. I'm just going to go do different things." And it was, I didn't understand how devastating it was, Rocky. So by 2007, when I knew I should have pulled the plug, 2005, I knew I should have pulled the plug, but it would have been too early. Too many people would have got hurt. 2007, okay, this would have been a good time to pull the plug, but I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have an advisor. I didn't have a coach. And so by 2008, now I'm like, oh, okay, this is really bad. But then, I had some personal changes and, I had my 5th kid at that point, and I'm like, well, I don't have another industry to go to. So there was so many forces playing on it, but I can't, express enough the importance of having guidance around you. I think that's transformation stops when you actually become your own reference point. I have a great quote that I share, like I do a weekly call, much like you're doing here on your podcast, but I do a weekly call. And 2 weeks ago, I said, if you're not getting what you want in your life, stop listening to yourself. And that's because I'm like, what I've usually discovered, if you're not getting what you want in your life, it's because usually the advice, guidance, or direction you're receiving from the people around you is not serving you.
And I think that's a very difficult thing, is to find people who will best serve you. It's not easy to find a great mentor.
I agree.
And I think that's the difficult part for most people.
Well, I will say this. A bad mentor is better than no mentor because you'll be able to figure it out quick by your results. But no mentorship at all means you're just listening to yourself, and we already know how that turns out. Most people are struggling with the internal dialogue of psycholinguistics, right? Self-talk of the mind. And what I realized is that the more I got internal listening to myself, the more I started to create and fabricate. And I talk about the fact that suffering only exists when you argue with what is. When you start being subjective to your own reality, you start to really fail. And if you really want to get successful, objectivity to your subjective experience is necessary. And I restarted Human Potential International because I realized that one of the benefits of being a coach, advisor, mentor to people actually helps me with my own subjective, objective reality, which means I stop and I say, hey, I'm giving advice to this, to this person. Was that true for me? So it actually supports me in my own, subjective, objective way. So yeah, but I totally hear what you're saying, that I think that that if people should just have somebody that they're reaching out to get some feedback and insight from to produce better and higher results. It's just what I've experienced.
And that's very true. The other thing is, I don't think people realize how much negative self-talk is going on in their head, and that the fact it's going on in everyone's head. And we don't talk about that as much. And we don't bring it to the forefront and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling, and this is how it's affecting me. And then having others support you to change that and to bring about correction in those thoughts.
I can't agree more.
We'll be back with Casey in a moment. Imagine having all the money you wanted to live the life you choose. How does that happen? It's not about how much you make. It's about how much you keep. Do you know anyone who cares more about your money than you? Sure, they care about getting your money, but not in helping you keep your money. That's why profit has to come first for you. As a business owner or a person, you need to pay yourself first. Your profits should come out of sales up front and not what's left after expenses. It's really not hard, and if you haven't already set up a system to create profit first, then you're way behind. It's time to make that change. Set up a call to ensure profit comes first in your business. After all, how much more freedom and ability to grow would you have if you were highly profitable and had access to those profits? Email me at rocky@richyoursoul.com to have a no-obligation call and learn more about how you could implement this change, setting aside profit before you paid your bills. Now, Let's get back to this amazing conversation with Casey.
In 2015, started Human Potential International. I know that you can point people to my website, but I started it with two beautiful men, great business partners. They were really excellent. They were, one of them was a master at timeline therapy. The other was a master in NLP. And we were board certifying people throughout Canada, United States, and around the world for hypnosis and for NLP and all kinds of things. And of course, I have a huge business background. I've owned 25 companies. I've employed hundreds of people. I've led hundreds of thousands of people. I've mentored millions around the world through my tapes, books, audios, and all the things I'd done. So in 2012, after I kind of came out of the Amway thing in 2010 and kind of took a break for a couple of years, I was like, you know what am I going to do? And I'm like, let's get back into professional development because I missed that community. And I got into it, loved it. We started getting going, but my business partners, both of them, very spiritual guys. One of them kind of wanted to go down the spiritual path. The other one's kind of more of a, like the personal growth path. And I'm like, guys, I actually am looking for something quite different. I actually think that we need to lead people to their own potential, but more importantly, that needs to transact into something that's financial for them. I said, I don't think you can have a lot of choices in the materialistic world today if people don't have money. And I mean, I'm not talking minimum wage. I think the average person should be should have enough ability, unique ability, that they should be able to survive in a way that's, that's good for them. I don't want to put anything on anyone other than say whatever's best for you is best for you. But I also believe that financially people should have better choices. So what happened for me was I made the shift and I handed back all the intellectual property rights and everything back in 2015. And in 2015, I went off the radar. So if you go look me up, say, hey, what was Casey doing in 2012, 13, 14, and into 15, you would say, oh, he was running this great big company and they were leading thousands of people and everything was great. In 15, I gave my notice, said, guys, I'm going to go in a different direction. And I took a sabbatical again and I went and did some private consulting. And when I left the space, I shut off from people because, all the people I knew were connected to either Human Potential or to Amway. And I went into a vacuum and beautiful, loving life partner, Sandra, she's the most incredible soul I've ever met. And she's just a blessing in my life. But, we found ourselves in 2016 and 2017 quietly alone at night. And I remember entering into bouts of depression and I didn't know what it was. I didn't recognize it at the time. And she would just look at me and she goes, what's wrong, sweetheart? I go, I don't know what this feeling is. This feeling of like sadness for no reason. Why do I have sadness? Why do I have a despair about me? I didn't know. I had never experienced depression before. So I was sitting in this space. And fortunately, I'm so heavily trained. I've been, life coached and trained a kabillion times. My iPod's worth $1 million of training and coaching I did, from 2000 and, from 2000 to 2010. I mean, I was at seminars for almost 46 weekends out of 52 a year for 10 years. I mean, so it wasn't like I wasn't knowledgeable, but I had sitting in a vacuum just 2 years ago, Rocky. I was literally going, I think this is called depression. And, I finally went and met a person and said, could you just help me with this? Like, why do I just get sad for no reason, but hang there? And, we went through this thing. They went back and, we checked some things. And at the end, it's just like, honestly, you're clinically depressed. And I didn't know what to do. And I never, most people if you look at my resume, you think I'm a success coach because I teach about, crushing it and producing these huge particular results and these massive, overcoming resistance and all kinds of stuff. And I think the reason I've come back to Human Potential International is because, I am probably the most compassionate and the most sensitive I've ever been. And it's like literally right now. Like I can tell you, even coming into this year, Rocky, like I started Human Potential and I said, listen, I don't care if you've got, I put a retail price of $100. And I said, if you want to give me $10, you got to pay something because of the law of reciprocity. So, pay $10. I don't even care, but pay what you want. But just come and sit in the presence of awareness. Because if you don't sit in the presence of other awareness, you'll sit in the presence of your own awareness. And I know where that leads because I just came from there. And that's a dark place. And you don't need to be alone. You don't need to think there's something wrong. Sometimes you just need an objective view of the way you're looking at something. So I created Human Potential to help not only people, multiply their success and all the wonderful things that go along with human potential, but I think I'm to create a very safe place for people that have experienced sadness or depression, or they don't know where to go and they don't know what to do. And they just wish there was somebody or somewhere they could go that would understand. And so for me, my resume says I'm a rock star, but my personal life experience says that I also know what it's like to be a failure, or to feel like I failed, or to be unsuccessful because I felt that way, but I didn't know why. And I experienced depression and a whole bunch of things, and later found out I was diagnosed with PTSD because we haven't talked about my whole story here, but I know what it's like to go through divorce. I know what it's like to go through bankruptcy. I know what it's like to lose my identity. I know what it's like to get in a car accident or a motorcycle accident. I broke my collarbone in 4 places and my ribs and lay in a bed for 3 days. Well, the creditors came and emptied out all my buildings and assets and companies. I mean, I know what it's like to be at the very bottom. I know what it's like to be at the very top. And I referred to the law of duality earlier. I know what it's like to be super high, and I also know what it's like to be super low. And what I think today is a chance for me to just kind of stand in that space of raw authenticity and say, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay, but it's not going to be okay if you stay in your own lonely place. You got to put yourself into a position where you're listening and connecting with others in a very deeply safe place. But you've got to get out of your head. Psycholinguistics, it will literally turn you into a very dark place that can lead to even suicide thoughts, and which obviously is no good for anybody. That's probably a little more than we're thinking, Rocky, but that's my truth.
And that's perfectly fine. We like to go deep on this show, and so I appreciate you sharing that. We've talked throughout this about unique ability. I think this is an area that people struggle with because, as I mentioned before, when you have a unique ability, you just think it's so easy that everyone must be able to do this and there's nothing special about you. How do you identify your unique abilities, and then how do you, for lack of a better word, capitalize on them?
Great subjects. Let me back it up and then push it forward so we're all on the same page. So first of all, every person is born with unique talent. And unique talent means it's an ability to do things a certain way. So some people are musical and they can sing. Some people are mechanical and they can throw a basketball. Some people are spatial and they can become an artist and they can see things and they can paint. Some people are introspective, which means they're great psychology. Some people are have a high sense of divinity. They're very spiritually connected. Some people have a green thumb and they understand plant life and growth. And I could list the other 11 forms of genius. But the first thing we have to identify is that everybody's special. There's no one way to do anything. Everyone's born with unique talent. So what moves something from a talent to an ability is time and focus, and focus being first, time being second. And if we take the story back and we'll just use Michael Jackson as an example, Michael Jackson has been singing and dancing since literally they have video footage of him at the age of 3 and 4. And he was on Ed Sullivan, I think at 6 or 7. I mean, just crazy amounts of time. So somewhere between 0 and 1,000 hours, you're going to have somebody's talent move to another level of ability. When it switches to a unique ability is when time and focus start to converge, and you start seeing it as something that you can just do. You do effortlessly. In fact, at the end of doing it, you even feel energized or feel like you could just keep doing it because you're like, it didn't take anything. And so I try and identify unique talent separate from unique ability, because an ability requires focus and time. So gestation period. When it comes time to doing certain assessments, so how does someone find their unique ability? Well, first, I think that it's important for them to understand that you find a unique ability begins first with them finding their unique talent. When you have that talent kind of in perspective. So are you mechanical? Are you linguistic, mathematical? Are you spatial? Are you, whatever that, when I try and use the first 11 forms of genius to just try and hone it into a vertical. And then from that vertical, the greatest thing I've discovered in helping someone find their unique ability talent is to go to the people who know them best and say to them this one thing. If you could have me do only one thing for you, one thing, and you needed it done and that you could trust me with it, what would you have me do? And depending on the way that wording or phrasing, and I always, depending, are they trying to find their unique ability for their business? Are they trying to find their unique ability in their life? There's a couple of ways to work around that, because sometimes someone's unique ability in life is not necessarily going to translate to a business. It could, and or to a service, and it could. And obviously I encourage people to try and get it there, but like sometimes it's just the unique ability in life. So in my case, I went and did surveys. So I called, mother, father, my aunt, my sister, the people that I knew around me. Then I did a staff meeting, and then I did a leadership meeting with my team. And after surveying 37 people, 36 of them came back and said, just teach and talk about things. They're like, just teach and talk. And I realized really quickly that I take a lot of data in when I'm listening and learning, as I mentioned earlier, my auditory ability, and then I simplify, and I tend to be able to teach it back to people really quickly. And when I learned that, I was like, oh, that's my unique ability. And they said, yep, that's what you get paid for. So, and then looking back historically on all of my wealth creation, it's like anytime I was talking about something or selling something, so to speak, that's where all my wealth came from. My ability to problem solve with simple solutions or simple explanations was where my wealth was. So how people can find their unique, and again, understanding there's a unique talent that's God-given, you build a unique ability that's human amplified. So God-given is that you're born with it. You can sing, but if you don't put 1,000 hours into singing, you could be a great karaoke singer at a bar, but you're never going to be a Grammy Award winner. You've got to put the time in, because what you learn naturally, just because the gift is there naturally, doesn't mean that it doesn't need to be honed professionally to optimize it to compete in the marketplace as a valuable resource. Does that help?
It helps tremendously. Thank you. One of the things that we had talked about before the interview started was balance. And I struggle with the word balance because I think everyone misinterprets balance. They think everything has to be equal, and life is not equal. Everything's not in balance. It's more about being in balance with yourself. But you came up with a much better word and a much better way to explain it. So you simplified it. You made it teachable.
Thank you, Rocky. Yeah, you mentioned just as we were going into the call here, you said, I don't like the word balance, but you used the word sprints. And when you come to our events live, one of the four, I teach a series of core concepts that you have to have in context before you can even sit through a Casey event, because I can be a lot to digest, Rocky. One of the first concepts I teach is mind projection fallacy, which is there's no out there. There's only in here looking out there, making stuff up. And mind projection fallacy is that it's not true. It's just true for you. So knowing that, I kind of walk people into that space. And then from there, I walk people down into just getting no expectation about anything. So William Shakespeare said that nothing's neither good nor bad, but thinking make it so. And I believe that that's true. I think that everything is subjective to our objective reality. But one of the things that, and as it keeps stepping down, around the fifth element I teach, as I said, and the other thing I want to take off the table is popular psychology. I said there are things that I think that were helpful in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, into the 90s, 2000s. People were elevating psychology. So you'd turn on a radio program and you'd hear words like, you need to have a balanced life, or they'd be projecting popular philosophy and psychology. It wasn't true, but it was gentle enough for the masses to hear kind of, in kind of like new awarenesses. Today, I think that there can be a great deal of damage done when you start using words like having a balanced life. So I often picture a clown at a circus when I talk about the life map. As you know, Rocky, I teach there's 10 areas of life map. And it's like, if we talk about relationships and finances and business and health and mental, emotional and physical and all these different areas, you've got all these plates spinning, like a clown's got a plate spinning in the top of a stick. And if you get, the first plate spinning, second plate spinning, third plate spinning, fourth plate spinning, fifth, by the time you get to that 10th plate and try and get it up there spinning, you would have a balanced life, except the first plate's already crashed, And so I use the philosophy of harmony. Harmony is the magic of music. In fact, I use a jazz band and harmony. As you know, at any one moment, Rocky, any part of a jazz band, the music's playing. Now, the magic is the nothingness between the notes. The nothingness is that moment of presence that makes music powerful. And in harmony, what makes harmony work is that it is in alignment as far as chord and as far as melodic tone goes. But it moves forward. So if you were to say to me, well, Casey, how do you build harmony in your life? I said, well, when I'm with my partner, Sandra, or let's just talk about relationships. So I'll say my kids or Sandra, when I'm present with them, I don't have my cell phone. Like I'm present in the present with the present because they are my present. Like that's what I know. And only with permission, I'll say to them, hey, I'm going to go upstairs and just switch my phone on. I want to take care of you things. So I acknowledge the harmony at that moment. My wife or my kids are the most important part of the music playing in my world. That doesn't mean my business is shut off, or it doesn't mean my health isn't working, or I'm not focused on my relationship, spiritually, or, any of the other areas of my life. What it means is that I'm moving them in and out of the harmony. I like the idea of harmony. I like the idea of music. Sometimes the sax is louder than the singer. Sometimes the singer is louder than the piano. Sometimes the drums are louder than the piano. The harmony is moving back and forth, and it's the stillness between the notes that creates the melodic tension that makes up this thing we call life. So for me, I've eliminated, and I'll tell you how I found out that balance was a bad thing. In perfect and true, absolute perfection and balance is zero. Because you have to have zero movement on either side, which is death. I took balance out of my vocabulary a long time ago because I'm not seeking death.
I think it's time for me to take it out of mine. We talked a little bit at the beginning, and we've touched on this. I think people want to transform. They want more, but it's not easy. How do you get people to transform, to take action, to move forward?
Excellent. Let me begin, because transformation is a masterful subject. It's a beautiful subject. Let me begin first, though, with a quote so that we're all kind of on the same page. And the quote that I've been sharing for years, I got it from a friend of mine. He's worth $100 million, very successful man. His name is Randy Haugen. And Randy looked at me one day. I was brand new diamond level in the Amway business. I was making about $100,000 a month, and he was probably making that a week. And maybe a day. He was just so successful. And he looked at me and said, Casey, people change long enough to get what they want, and eventually they go back to who they are. And because I was dealing with a crisis at the time of a major leader had come in and he'd hit this new level, and then he basically took off and vacationed and new houses and cars but he was abandoning his responsibility and roles as leadership and empowering people, and gave his word and wasn't there. And he said, Casey, people change long enough to get what they want. Eventually they go back to who they are, because they didn't transform, they transacted. And I thought, wow, that is really interesting. He says, most people are transactional for change. They're not transformative for change. And I said, well, what's the difference? He says, people will do anything to get what they want. He says, but will they become who they need to be to get what they want? And so the difference in transformation is from most people want to transact. They don't want to transform. So my company is focused on transformation, which means that it's not just about, I think transaction is important, but I don't think it's the only thing. Transforming is moving you from being a human doing to a human being. And learning how to be a human being is where the power and the magic is. The human being side of me is not like, so for example, if I want to learn about, let's just say, transformation, I can go pick up a whole bunch of books, learn about transformation, and say, okay, I got it. And I put the books away, and that's it. I transacted my knowledge about transformation. But if I really want to be an agent of transformation, I would not only just read those books, I would actually move from the transaction to the well, who is a person that transforms? And I would look for the elements in myself that I would like to transform. So for example, I'd pull apart maybe my health, my eating, my financial spending, my my relationship with my wife or kids or whatever's important to me, maybe my spiritual connection. So I get to shift not just the doing, but the being, the way I approach the subject of transformation. I think that's the key. So the two words there are most people transact for change. Very few people transform for change.
And that probably explains the weight loss industry, because people go on diets, they follow a thing to get to a certain weight, they weigh in, and then they have a slice of pizza and a bowl of ice cream to celebrate. And that's not transformation. That's, as you said, transactional. And I know I was a lot heavier years ago, and I have transformed my diet, and I transform the way that I work out, and I keep improving it and changing it. And the cool thing is the older I become, the more flexible and stronger I become. So it's going in the right direction instead of the wrong direction. But that was a transformation of who I am.
That's right.
I think that applies to every area of life. We have to be the person that we want to become and not just act like them when no one's looking.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to some of the big changes that people want, most people want changes in either their finances, their relationships, their physical health, the more predominant ones. And I kind of come from a different space. If I give somebody the magic lantern and I say, what do you wish for? I wish to be my ideal weight, or I wish to be a millionaire, or I wish to, have the ideal life partner. They use up their three wishes really quickly, trying to transact the getting of something. And I tell people, I said, listen, if you get a magic lantern, literally wish for transformation, to transform, to be the person who receives the ideal life partner, who stays at the ideal weight and has the ideal income and lifestyle. I said, because at the end of it, you are susceptible to the losing of it. And, Rocky, probably more than any people, the number of people who have bet on lotteries and win lotteries, and, within 3 to 5 years, they're deader or broker than the day they won the lottery, because they got the money, but they were not being a person who could receive the wealth.
Absolutely not. Most people who receive wealth without becoming that person lose it. Whether it be lottery winners or inheritance or anything of that. It is a transformation process.
It is.
So that's very apropos.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you wanted to share on the subjects that we've been chatting about today, but didn't get a chance to?
I would love to share that my greatest takeaway is don't live life alone in a vacuum. Because I've just recently come out of a really difficult period of sadness and depression and despair, what happened to me was I couldn't think my way into a new way of acting, so I had to act my way into a new way of thinking. I am transforming the way I was looking at the changes I needed to make. I'm very, very smart. I mean, I've proven that 1,000 times, and I've done some pretty incredible things with my life, but I could not think myself out of this one. And I realized quickly, people that deal with sadness and depression and despair and all these emotions that they don't know what to do with them, they don't know what to label them. Albert Einstein said that the significant problems you face in life can't be solved at the same level of thinking you're at when you created the problem. And why I share that is that don't stay in a vacuum. Keep listening, keep learning, but don't listen to yourself alone. If you're not getting what you want, stop listening to yourself and start listening to the voices of others. But more importantly than that, get off your cell phone, get off your internet, go meet people, go talk, go get connected, go find events to attend. We are so busy staying in a digital world that we forget that we're actually human beings that need these social interactions and awarenesses. To me, if I could give that piece of advice, that's what I would do. I say, find a place to go put yourself in where you could just connect with other human beings. You may not even like them. That's one of the things that's really interesting. I actually gravitate now. I just share this last thing, Rocky, is that I found myself, I would go to these events and I'd go, I don't like that guy. And I literally was hear myself say that. I'm like, oh. And then I would say to myself, oh, why don't I understand him? And I would literally go put myself in the presence of someone I couldn't stand. And you know that the genius of doing that is the closer you get to people you don't understand, the more you are a human being, the more you realize it's like, oh, I can't have judgment because now I'm in the know. And I would think it's one of the things that probably has been a radical shift for me. When I get into a room that has people in it, that there's always one that's just not my cup of tea sort of thing. I'm like, oh, that's who I'm going to connect with, the guy that I don't understand or the gal that I don't understand.
And I kind of refer that as to shifting the lens that you're viewing the world through.
Exactly.
Because there's a million lenses and we're just using one pair, and there's a whole lot of other ways to look at the situation. And as you look at it in different ways, you get a very different perspective. You're forcing yourself to say, I'm going to shift my lens. I'm going to look at this differently and figure out what's another way to look at it.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for that.
Based on our conversation today, what's one action step people can take to move forward this week?
I think we just shared it, but I think the action step they should is make sure that they are out connecting with real humans and being interactive, listening to other people's opinions. I have a quote that says that the more that you are convinced or you're convicted that you're right, the lower your IQ. I share that with because the more certain you are about things means that you're not available to new conversations, new mindsets, new awarenesses. And with the shifting of technologies and the speed at which artificial intelligence and the medical industry and shifts in all areas, even finances with technologies such as Bitcoin and the blockchain. I mean, it's like whatever you do, don't be so certain about anything. Go out and put yourself out into the real world with real people and ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Don't be certain because it's just a sign of lower IQ.
And so I'm going to add to that because someone posted something the other day. We're so far away from the election, it's beyond comprehension, but it seems to already become a big issue in the United States. Everyone has already dug in on where they're going for an election that's not going to happen probably for 18 months. As you go through this season, just take that advice. Understand the other person's point of view and look at it in a different perspective. And I stay out of politics for the most part, but it just seems so apropos to that comment because I can just see it already starting to heat up for something that's far, far away.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I'm a life learner, and I find myself never settling or satisfying myself with just knowing what I know. I think the most beautiful thing you can do for yourself is constantly open yourself up to the conversation of being that you could be wrong and that you don't know everything and that you could just keep immersing yourself in life lessons and life learning.
And I've been doing a lot of that myself, constantly trying to figure things out and learn and see things from a different perspective.
For sure.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Compassion. I was number one in my first business, number one in my second, and number one in Canada. I've been so successful at the traditional human doing side that I was not a human being and I had to lose everything. I mean, my relationships, my wealth, my health, literally my self-image and self-esteem for me to be a compassionate person that's got like, wow, not every day I'm going to be a crushing it rock star. There are going to be days that life's going to suck and I'm not going to be able to pull myself up. I remember the day that I literally said, I should all over myself. You should this, Casey, you should that, you should. I was shoulding all over myself. I should know better. I'm smarter than this. Giving myself this pep talk. And it occurred to me in the middle of my pep talk, if I could do better, I'd do better, but I can't. This is the best I could do. And at that moment, I gave myself the compassion of forgiving myself for not being able to do better and just loved myself for where I'm at and said, well, the best I can do is the best I can do. If I could do better, I'd do better. And this is where I'm at. So compassion today is probably the greatest thing I've learned in the later part of my life.
And as we age, we get wisdom, right? Hopefully.
We sure do. We sure do.
What's one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
I would say the thing that, and it's still today, is the mentorship and advisor. Find somebody that truly cares about you and is a good person and has the attributes and qualities that you would like to have, and partner with them and say, I'd like to partner with you on this journey called life and see where we can take this. Today, life coaching, and you can pay for it. There are some people who are blessed to have it in a friend or a pastor or somebody that they know through a social circle of some sort. But for the most part, that person plays a critical role. I would say that in reflection, I'm 54 now. The younger advice I give myself is find mentorships and coaches and people that can just give you excellent advice, because it accelerates time, and life is better with acceleration.
It is. Learn from other people's mistakes instead of your own.
That's correct.
So if people would like to learn more, find you and connect, what is the best place for them to do that?
The main company I'm spending my heart with today is humanpotentialinternational.com. Of course, in there's CaseyJamesCombden.com, but Human Potential International is where they can come and learn. I also have an online training company called Next Level Networker, which is my 30-year legacy to the network marketing industry. For people that are not involved in network marketing, then that won't be of value to them. But Human Potential is where I'm putting some training and certifications and things that people can participate in, and love to have them come and learn about what we're doing.
And I will put that in the show notes, and I encourage people to always check things out and learn and see what possibility is out there. Thank you so much for joining us today, Casey.
Rocky, a real pleasure. Thank you so much. You're doing a great show here. It's wonderful.
Clearly, where you focus your attention is where you get results. Are you attending trainings, being coached, having mentors and advisors help you to achieve the success you want faster, and also to help you avoid mistakes? That's how Casey was able to achieve so much. Which of these have you used to get ahead? Which do you need to take the next step? I know I've used a lot of these different ones, and they've tremendously helped me to take the next step. Speaking of next steps, this week's action step: connect with other people and learn from them, even people you don't like. I'm surprised at how many people won't listen to someone because they don't like them. Everyone has something to share, and there's something that you can learn from them, regardless of their likability. That said, make sure you're taking advice from the right person. For example, I would take investing advice from Warren Buffett, along with a lot of other advice, but I don't know that I'd look to him for parenting advice. We need to change the lens we see the world through and examine multiple lenses. There are so many different viewpoints, and I've learned to stop just looking at mine. We also have to watch out for the negative thoughts in our head. We all have them, and overcoming those and getting out of them and taking the next step is extremely important. I really enjoyed the point Casey made about balance versus harmony. And from now on, I'm going to focus on harmony. Hey, if you're still listening, you must have liked the episode. So please share it with a few friends. And if you get a chance, leave a review. I'd appreciate that. You can also connect with me on Facebook, and there's both a Facebook page and a Facebook group for Richer Soul. What's preventing you from moving forward, and who are you putting on your team to help build the life you deserve? Taking no action creates a far worse outcome in life than trying something and failing. Can I help you achieve your goals through coaching and accountability? Just email me, and we can start with a short chat to see if we're a good fit. For many people, one session allows them to take a giant leap forward toward their dreams. You can reach me at rocky@richersoul.com. I'd love to hear how you're doing and how the information I have shared has helped you. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.